In part 1, I talked about the origins of humans. I finished the episode with the figurines of Berkat Ram and Tantan. I recommend you to listen to previous episode before continue with this one. Homo erectus was the most successful hominid species. They were on Earth 8 times longer than we have been here so far. They were the first to move out of Africa, reaching as far east as China and Indonesia. They are ancestors of every species of Homo that came after them. They have 9 subspecies. One group ended up on a small island called Flores. Due to the limited space on the island, evolutionary changes made them smaller. Their name is Homo florensis, but they are nicknamed hobbits. Another group of Homo erectus split in Africa around 700,000 years ago and evolved into Homo heidelbergensis. This species was named after the town in Germany where it was found. Homo heidelbergensis exhibited robust physical features. They had a larger brain than earlier hominins, they used more advanced tools, and engaged in complex behaviors. These hominins lived in Africa approximately 700,000 to 300,000 years ago, with different populations evolving into Neanderthals in Europe and Homo sapiens, us, in Africa. Some populations of Homo heidelbergensis reached Siberia, and from there, they evolved into Neanderthals and eventually into Denisovans. Genetic analysis indicates that the Denisovans are closely related to Neanderthals, with their split dating back approximately 400,000 years ago. In Papua New Guinea, DNA suggests that interbreeding occurred around 46,000 years ago again. In comparison to Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis exhibited a more modern human-like facial structure. This included a smaller chin, a long jaw with human-like jaw muscles, and a larger brain size. In East Africa, specifically in Zambia, a skull of Homo heidelbergensis was discovered. Scientists found evidence of tooth decay in its teeth. This was confusing because typically tooth decay is associated with agriculture. The average height of Homo heidelbergensis was around 170 centimeters. They hunted animals for meat, including deer, elephants, boar, ibex, and even rhinos. They were also the first species to use spears, although these spears were designed for stabbing rather than throwing. The oldest Homo heidelbergensis specimen in northern Europe was discovered in England, in town of Fortwich, near Canterbury, dating back around 600,000 years. During this period, Britain was not an island yet. It was connected to mainland Europe through a land bridge known as Doggerland. This Paleolithic site was inhabited by this species for an extended period. They crafted various tools to fulfill different needs, including hunting, fishing, and the production of clothing. Before Homo heidelbergensis came to Europe, there was another group of Homo genus that also roamed Europe. They were the first arrivals in Europe. Their name was Homo antecessor, or pioneer man. They lived from 1.2 million years ago to 800,000 years ago. Their footprints were found in Hillsborough in East England. Their bones were discovered in the cave Grandolina in Spain. What is interesting is that almost all the fossils that were found were children, with 2 individuals in early adolescence. The skull shows more features of the previous species. But, and this is horrific, Homo antecessor was probably a cannibal. All the bones found show signs of butchering and cutting the flesh, and the cut marks match the stone shapes that Homo antecessor used. Was it a ritual? Was it because of the lack of food? Was it somebody from a different tribe? Enemy? We will never know. Of all hominids, we know the most about the Neanderthal, or Homo neanderthalensis. They were named after Neanderthal Valley in Germany. Neanderthals, close relatives to modern humans, lived in Europe and parts of Asia from around 400,000 to 40,000 years ago. Neanderthals are known for their robust and stocky bodies. They had wider rib cages, wider pelvises, shorter forearms, and shorter forelegs compared to modern humans. The average height of Neanderthal was around 165 centimeters for males and 155 centimeters for females. They had unique physical features, such as a thick and wider neck and more pronounced chest. These characteristics contributed to stability, stronger breathing, and possibly greater lung capacity. The Neanderthal physique was an adaptation to the cold climates of Ice Age Europe and Siberia. Their shorter limbs helped retain body heat. Neanderthals were adapted for sprinting rather than endurance. Neanderthals, they had distinct facial features and skull characteristics. Their skulls were elongated, wider, and less rounded than those of modern humans. Neanderthal eyeballs were larger, thus, they had better vision than us. The Neanderthal nose projected forward, helping them to warm the air before it reached their lungs. Neanderthal has a prominent jaw and a strong bite force, but similar dental wear patterns as modern humans. They had a larger brain than us. Modern humans have an average brain size of 1,400 cubic centimeters, while the brains of Neanderthals measured around 1,600 cubic centimeters. The skin tone of individuals residing in Northern Europe was paler compared to those who inhabited the Middle East and Eastern Asia. They hunted with spears. Neanderthal diet consisted of red deer and mammoth meat. Let it sink in. They hunted mammoths. Not scavenging the dead corpses, but hunting. Mammoths are twice the size of modern African elephants, and the bones of mammoths that Neanderthal hunted are mostly those of older males. As in African elephants, female mammoths traveled in herds, while older males were solitary creatures. Also, very important to say, Neanderthals didn't have projectiles. Their weapons were made for stabbing, in close range. This suggests one and one thing only: cooperation. Imagine, in the icy tundra, a group of Neanderthals spots a solitary older male mammoth. Its long tusks a testament to its age and experience. The group huddles together, silently, not to startle this giant, and devises a plan to take down the prey. With silent gestures, they divide into two groups, one to drive the mammoth towards an ambush point, and the another one to await its arrival. As the mammoth nears the trap, they start the chase. As the mammoth nears the trap, the waiting Neanderthals unleash a barrage of spears, aiming for the mammoth's legs and soft belly. The mammoth bellows in pain and confusion, but he is strong. The Neanderthals continue their assault, using their collective intelligence and teamwork to bring down the mighty beast. A few Neanderthals are crushed under the mammoth as it backs up, trying to flee. They survive, but their legs are broken. The remaining Neanderthals poke and stab the prey. The wounded mammoth makes sounds. He is strung high in the air, but nobody comes to the rescue. He is surrounded and alone. The wounded mammoth falls down. One Neanderthal takes his spear and, with the weight of their own body, pierces the heart of the mammoth. The latest researchers and archaeologists have found tens of thousands of mammoth bones, the largest Ice Age animal in Europe, that match the cut marks only made by the weapons of the Neanderthals. Butchering a 6 to 8 ton mammoth is a monumental task. Just imagine going through the fur, the thick skin, the bone, blood, and the organs. Archaeologists have found Neanderthals' weaponry that is still sharp after tens of thousands of years. The butchering in the field must have attracted other predators, such as wolves, cave lions, dire wolves, hyenas, giant short-faced bears, and the saber-toothed cats. All of these predators were at least double the size of their modern counterparts. The meat of one mammoth could feed perhaps 100 individuals for a month. This can only mean one thing: an extremely well-organized community. Neanderthals are very important in our story. When they were discovered in 1864, the scientist who discovered them, William King, left a long-lasting impression of our evolutionary cousins. At the time of the discovery, a racist theory of persons' intelligence was based on the shape of the skull. Of course, Northern Europeans had the most perfect skull, and therefore they were considered the most intelligent. Racism is not a sign of intelligence. William King observed the skull of the Neanderthal and concluded that this species was not intelligent. From that time onwards, the Neanderthal was a term for a brute, or someone not smart, not intelligent, stupid. In the last few decades, that picture has changed, but not everyone is aware. Neanderthals invented glue. They glued and attached the head of a spear to thick wooden sticks. This technique is known as hefting. They, of course, made fire and cooked their food. They used flint on flint to make fire, but also wood and a string by creating friction between a smaller stick and larger wood. This method is taught in all survival courses today. This tells you about their ingenuity. They cared about the sick and old. Some Neanderthals exhibited evidence of limb healing after a fracture. Some of their bones showed immense pressure, such as a stamping by a large animal, maybe even a mammoth. Their bone injuries resembled those of rodeo riders in the USA. The injured bones of Neanderthals show healing. Somebody had to feed them, or bring food to them, and mend the broken leg or arm. That's caring for the loved ones. They had rituals. They intentionally buried their dead. That's belief in afterlife. It is fascinating to me that another species had a concept of afterlife. Remember, elephants have some kind of concept of death. When they encounter a dead elephant, or a skull of an elephant, the living herd touches it with their trunks in total silence. Sorry, I'm going off the topic. Belief in the afterlife. Think about it. Religion or spirituality, some kind of a belief, emerging within a species that is not us. It shows you that we, humans, are not that special. The Neanderthals probably had a conscience about themselves, as we do. In Bruniquel Cave in France, Neanderthals constructed artificial ring structures composed of broken stalagmites some 176,000 years ago. They built ring structures that had either walls that collapsed or were covered with animal skins, like a tent. That's architecture. They made strings and ropes. That's advance. They had jewelry necklaces and bracelets made of bones, seashells, and stones. That's decorative art. They used a bone tool for leather working to smoothen their animal hides. For a long time, it was thought that only Homo sapiens made these. At Neumark Nord, in Germany, Neanderthals cleared sections of the forest some 125,000 years ago, engaging in activities resembling planting. That's agriculture, way before Homo sapiens invented it. By studying the bones in their necks, scientists concluded that Neanderthals could make complex sounds. That's language. Can you imagine an entirely different language from another species? Not just random sounds and grunts, but a language like no other. Imagine hearing their language. How did it sound? Did they have vowels? How many sounds could they produce? How many words did they have in their language? Did they use syntax, metaphor, onomatopoeia? They must have used onomatopoeia. They were surrounded by sounds of animals in nature. Could they make poetry? Could they sing? Imagine if we could know their words for tree, sky, river, wolf, bear. Was their grammar similar to human language? Could they communicate with other Neanderthals, hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away? How did they communicate with us? We mated, that's for sure. That's in our DNA. Oh yeah, Homo sapiens and the Neanderthals interbred. Neanderthal ancestry is responsible for the red hair in modern humans. If you are of European descent, you have a percentage of Neanderthal DNA. Northern Europeans generally have a slightly higher percentage of Neanderthal DNA compared to the Southern Europeans. Neanderthals were our cognitive equals. 65,000 years ago, in Ardales Cave, near the town of Malaga in Spain, Neanderthal used red pigments to paint marks on the walls. Homo sapiens didn't reach Europe until 40,000 years ago. It is definite proof that these were done by the Neanderthal. They produced non-figurative art. Neanderthals produced mostly non-figurative art. There's evidence of depicting animals, but that's rare. Maybe their emphasis was on conveying messages through personal expression, rather than the depictions of the world around them. Who knows? 64,000 years ago, in Spain's La Pasiega cave, Neanderthals made art with the red ochre pigment on the stalagmatic dome of the cave. It held some kind of a significance in their cultural and social life. They probably used pigments on their bodies too. Did they use color to scare off predators, bad spirits, to prepare for the hunt, a ritual? The disappearance of the Neanderthal was, for a long time, attributed to the arrival of Homo sapiens into their habitat. We lived together for at least 5,000 years, but some argue even 20,000 years. The Neanderthals were not suited to hunt smaller animals, and when the big animals went extinct because of climate change, Neanderthal followed. They were more suited to endure the harsher, colder climate and couldn't adapt to the warming of the planet. The very last Neanderthal male that we know so far died in most southern tip of Spain. Was he aware that he is the last one of his species? Did he knew, or was he looking over horizon, waiting for his loved ones, family, tribe, species? I had to mention one more species of the Homo genus, Homo naledi. When they were discovered, in came system called the Rising Star, or Naledi, in local Sasseto language in southern Africa, Homo naledi confused the scientists. The species was more archaic and more ancient. Initially, they thought it was a species that lived at least 1,000,000 years ago. Homo naledi is a species that has characteristics of various hominins. The skull looks like that of Homo erectus. Even the brain is of similar size. Homo naledi height was around 1.4 meters, but its legs were long, like modern humans, indicating it was a long-distance walker, possibly a runner. But also, it had shoulders like early hominins, leaning forward, but arms like modern humans. The hands were like ours, but they were a little bit curved, and it had a thumb that extended like early hominins. Then the scientists analyzed the tooth of Homo naledi to determine how many years the tooth absorbed the Earth's natural radiation. I mean, kudos to science. Anyway, the estimate age of Homo naledi was around 200,000 years. This implies that Homo naledi and Homo sapiens existed during overlapping time periods. Homo naledi was discovered in a remote part of a cave under a thin layer of dirt. They found several individuals lying there. There was no mass death. The water didn't wash them there. They were the only species there. It suggested burial. One individual had a stone axe in its hands. And then, on the walls of the cave, there was a stone carving. Homo naledi made art. It looks similar to the geometric art of the Neanderthals. Both species' art consisted of simple markings, engravings, and geometric shapes, and most definitely the symbolic representation of something important to them. There is a Netflix documentary about this. You should watch it. It's called Unknown Homo naledi. There was also Homo florensis, known as the Hobbit. They lived approximately 100,000 to 50,000 years ago, also very recent. Maybe there are more species of the Homo genus yet to be found. As I mentioned before, we, Homo sapiens, interbred with another group of Homo genus in what is now Siberia. They were named Denisovans after the cave there. But the evidence of their existence was found in Laos, some 4,000 kilometers in between. And between them there was Tibetan Plateau, not very accessible to reach. There are no complete skeletons of this species. We have found only a pinky finger and a tooth. By the way, the genes for freckles were dominant in the Denisovans and most of the Neanderthal. So if you have freckles, that means that you are related to Neanderthals. Fossils are rare to find. I'm sure that in the future we will discover one or two more species. Nevertheless, we have found enough fossils to understand our evolutionary story. Initially, we thought that evolution was straightforward. The concept of evolutionary tree suggested distinct branches, but as new data emerged, it became clear that Neanderthals, Denisovans, and humans interbred across all possible combinations, and the descendants of these interbred combinations repeated the whole process. Homo sapiens, Neanderthal, and Denisovans were able to interbreed because Homo heidelbergensis was their common ancestor. Neanderthal ancestry is responsible for the red hair in modern humans. We believed it was us, and only us, who started to make art. Other species of Homo genus were considered beneath us. They didn't and couldn't make art. We, air quote, knew that we were superior to other species. We labeled the Neanderthal as brutish and primitive, disregarding anything that point out otherwise. In our eyes, Neanderthals were considered uncultured. In fact, the early artists were Neanderthals, Homo naledi, and most certainly the Denisovans. Around 50,000 years ago, Denisovans made a stone bracelet from green chloride stone. The bracelet was smooth and polished. It has a diameter of 7 centimeters and it has a drilled hole in the middle, about 8 millimeters in size. The hole was drilled with a tool, now lost to time, with high speed and minimal inconsistency. When exposed to the direct light, whether fire or sunlight, the bracelet would appear spectacular. Denisovans could drill, polish, and grind stone before we ever could. Interestingly, the stone used for the bracelet was not local, but from a site some 200 kilometers away. The experts speculate that the bracelet was worn by a woman or a child. But this is pure speculation. We don't have definite knowledge. Now, it is time to introduce Homo sapiens. The name Homo sapiens translates to wise man. We emerged approximately 300,000 years ago in East Africa. Out of all hominins, we are the only species that survived. No species lives forever. Species adapt and either transform into something new or go extinct. We might merge with artificial intelligence and become as distant from our current selves as we are from Australopithecus. Nobody can predict the future with certainty. Imagine the art and artistic expressions that we can't even fathom right now. Just 300 years ago, nobody could have predicted the existence of film. To our ancestors, if somehow they could see us, we would appear like gods. This is even true for those who lived 500 or 1,000 years ago, not to mention those who lived 20,000 or 200,000 years ago. Let's conduct a thought experiment. If we observe ourselves, our parents, and their parents, it is evident that we all belong to the human species. But what if we go 1,000 generations back? That's roughly 20,000 years in the past. Surprisingly, they would still be humans. Now, consider going back 10,000 generations, or about 200,000 years. Even then, we would still encounter humans. These Paleolithic humans would be different, but we would recognize them as a part of our species. Jump ahead 80,000 generations, or approximately 1.5 million years back, we would see Homo erectus. Take a step further and go back 1,000,000 generations. That's 25 million years ago. At that point, the ancestor would resemble a monkey, not even an ape. It would possess a tail and it would swing from the branches of the tree in the African jungle. And if we continue tracking back in time, we would eventually arrive to the organism that is shared by all life on Earth. It is called LUCA, or Last Universal Common Ancestor. How many generations ago did the very first humans walk the Earth? Surprisingly, there was no single, air quote, first human. This may sound illogical, but it's true. In each generation, children bear a resemblance to their parents or grandparents, just as our children resemble us. Evolution is an ongoing and gradual process that spans across generations. Around 75,000 years ago, Homo sapiens left Africa and we started to settle in other regions of the world. The reasons behind this migration remains mysterious to us. Was it changes in environment? Was it population growth, curiosity, adaptation, cultural exchange, advanced cognitive abilities, social dynamics, or social pressure, or evolutionary pressures? The exact motivations remain unknown. What is clear is that the migration played a significant role in shaping art, culture, and human diversity. As our ancestors moved to northern regions, their skin pigmentation lightened due to the adaptation to the northern climate and environment. The first inhabitants of Europe had darker skin. For example, in UK, a reconstruction of Cheddar Man's head had been created based on his scalp shape and DNA analysis. Interesting fact, the Cheddar Man direct ancestor is a guy living few kilometers away from the site where the Cheddar Man was found. This man is a history teacher. It is estimated that Homo sapiens migrated at the pace of about 1 kilometer per year. The movement rate was relatively slow. To put this into perspective, the southern tip of America is approximately 12,000 kilometers away from East Africa. On the grand scope of our species, 12,000 years is a mere blink of an eye. It is very important to note that evidence from genetic studies and fossil record strongly support the idea that all modern humans are descendants of African ancestors. We have the remarkable cognitive abilities that played a crucial role in our survival and our capacity to adapt and thrive in diverse environments. At what point humans stop using random grunts and sounds? And when did they start using words? One of the theories says that first words and the language came from chants. Another theory says that language came from physical pain, such as ouch or I. You don't need to imagine first language of humans. The linguists argue that language of Sun people, the click language, was probably how the first human languages evolved. If you are one of those that wants to believe in religion, the very first words that Adam says to Eve is, "This." The passage goes, "This is now bones of my bones and flesh of my flesh." It is a perfect first word. Everything is variation of this, on all languages. By the way, the San people, also known as the Bushmen or Basavra, possess some of the oldest DNA lineages among modern human populations, dating back tens of thousands of years. Some argue even hundreds of thousands of years. If you observe them, you will notice that they have almond-shaped eyes, like Asian people. Their nose resembles European nose. The pigmentation of their skin is lighter and sometimes in darker tones. They possess unique physical features that can be found in people all around the world. Let me get back to the main story, the first artists. Scientists have identified the oldest known human carving, dating back around 73,000 years, on a rock fragment in South Africa. The carving features cross-hatch lines resembling a hashtag. It was found in Bloembosch Cave, located around 300 kilometers east of Cape Town. The drawing creator, whoever he or she was, used a sharp rock to engrave a pattern on it. We don't know who it was, how old they were when they made it. Maybe it was a child, playing, making doodles. You know when you have a long telephone conversation, and you have a pen and paper next to you, and you start making lines? Maybe this carving was one of those. Maybe somebody waited for a meal, or a friend to arrive, or something. We will never know. For me, it's very interesting to think about how this creation was made. We will never know, and I can speculate and make stories until tomorrow. I don't know what else to say in this episode. I want to thank you for joining and listening to this episode. I hope I inspired you. I hope you learned something.